Hi, I'm Chris Jordan, and in the video today we're going to be looking at another type of vocabulary question from the BULATS listening and reading test. So far we've already looked at the gap sentence question, which, if you remember, looks like this. So you see a sentence, there's a gap, and 4 choices, A, B, C, and D. The vocabulary item we're going to look at today, however, is not a single sentence, but a short text. So you have a text like this of about 150 words and 5 gaps. These texts are basically something you might meet in a work or workplace survival situation, and they cover a range of fairly general topics. They could be an email, a notice, part of an article or a report, an advertisement perhaps, or a news item. Another thing about them is that they are, in some sense, complete. That means they stand alone and you're not going to need any extra information to understand them or to get the right answers. So when we want to answer the question, all we need to do is to click on the gap and you'll be offered a selection of 4 words. As with the gapped sentence that we looked at in the previous videos, you have to choose the best word to fill each space. So how do we know which is the best word? Well, this is something we've looked at in some detail in the previous 4 videos, but if you remember, the key things to keep in mind are, first, the meaning. Of course, choosing the right word with the right meaning is always step 1. Now remember, the 4 words will quite possibly have similar meanings, so you need to be careful. Second, prepositions or similar words. We need to pay attention not just to the meaning of the word, but how it might be used with other words too. And prepositions or similar words can help us work out which choices are good and which might not be. Thirdly, collocations. These are words that are like friends, words that are normally used together to mean something. Essentially, these are the same kind of questions as what we've already been looking at for the gapped sentence question. The difference is that these are an independent text rather than set of individual sentences. Well, texts are more meaningful and there's more context to support you. It's also more like how we deal with language in real life. The sentences we need to understand or create are usually part of something like a text. So, let's spend a moment to look at how to do the question. The first thing to do is to look at what kind of text it is and what it's about. You'll see this information at the top of the screen, and this is really helpful information as it will prepare you for what you're going to read, and that's going to make it easier. So we see this is an article and it's about living and working in Frankfurt. The next thing to do is to read the text quickly, doing your best not to worry about the gaps. Now the purpose is just to get an understanding of what the text is about, so don't worry if there's some vocabulary you're not sure about, just read it as quickly as you can to get an overall idea. To help you read quickly though, I'm just going to give you 30 seconds. Are you ready? Go! Now let's go back to the first sentence with a gap, read through and see if we can work out what kind of word goes there or what kind of meaning it probably has. With its X of modern and traditional culture, Frankfurt is a wonderful place. we can probably work out that it's going to mean something about modern and traditional culture being together somehow. We might even be able to think of a word or two that it could be. Now we're ready to check the options, and we see 4 nouns here, mostly with a similar meaning and mostly meaning something about being together. Perhaps the word you thought of is even one of the choices. Well, let's start with A, combination. A combination of A and B does have the right meaning here, meaning several things joined together inside something else. B, merger, is a word usually used to talk about the formal joining of 2 companies or organizations. C, connection, means linked together, but not necessarily combined inside one thing. And D, with this meaning, relationship would need to be used with between rather than of, and the meaning still would not be quite right. So that means the best answer is A, combination. Now we read quickly through to the next sentence with a gap. As we said in the previous videos on the vocabulary question, after we've read the sentence, we should try to notice whether the gap seems to have a connection of some kind to any other word or group of words in the sentence. In this case, we might notice have accommodation X. So which of these words is gonna fit? Here, the best friend or collocation, meaning accommodation that can be rented or used, is have accommodation available. This is a really common collocation, in fact. Usable and convenient are not possible, and accommodation free is not a normal friend here. This all means, of course, that available is the best word for the space. After we read this sentence, we can probably feel that transportation here is going to have a big impact on the gap. In fact, these 2 words are very close friends or strong collocations. Now, before we look at the options, we can see one really important thing from this example. It's very normal in a text for a point raised in one sentence to be developed or explained more in the next sentence, as we have here. We see it goes on to talk about the airport, train station, trams, and buses. This extra information is really helpful, and it's going to help us identify the correct word. But before we look, can you guess a word it might be? Well, was the word you thought of one of these? So it's an efficient but cheap transportation X, and it includes an airport, train stations, and a very good network of trams and buses. So which word are you going to choose? Even if you're not 100% sure which word is often used with transportation, all of these things should sound like a system. So transportation system is what this is all describing. Let's quickly look at our last 2 gaps. We can read this as a unit first, as it's just a short paragraph. Now we're going to come back and look at the first gap. Again, the word or words that are going to be important are formal business X. Again, we can read the next sentence, which explains more, and we see it talks about how you should be on time and your clothing. So now, when we look at the choices, one of these words should stand out. Being on time and what you wear is unlikely to be atmosphere, method, or nature. But business culture is a great collocation, and in fact, it's a compound noun. Now, looking at the final gap, we are told we should X formally. Do any of these words look right? Looking at the options, we see some of these words take a direct object, so we have to wear or put on something. Appear formally isn't correct, but dress formally is, of course, a very good collocation. So, this type of text question in some ways is a little easier than the gap sentence because you have more context, and that means more support. So this type of question, remember to use all the help you can from the sentences that come before or after the gap. It can increase your chance of getting the right answer. We hope this gives you more confidence in dealing with the BULATS vocabulary item with a short text. Remember though, for more help preparing for BULATS or building your workplace English ability, please watch our other videos in this series. Thank you for watching today and good luck.